Hello, Blythe, Evie, Joe, Jack, Callum, and Cadence. It's story time. And today's story is Finn McCool, the Giant of Knockmany Hill. Finn McCool, the Giant of Knockmany Hill. The symbol on that page is an old Celtic symbol from Ireland. And on the first page, Finn McCool, the Giant of Knockmany Hill, retold and illustrated by Tommy de Paula. You see, this is a legend, an old story that's told in Ireland. So Tommy de Paula has retold it for you and has illustrated it. On the dedication page, it says, "For Flossie and the rest of the Wallingford Downey clan." So it begins. In olden times, when Ireland's glens and woods were still filled with fairies and leprechauns, giants too lived on that fair Emerald Isle. One of the finest of those big folk was Finn McCool, who was wed to the lovely great lass Una. They made their home on the top of Knockmany Hill. Do you see the leprechauns and the fairies in the woods? And do you see how Finn and Una are giants? Do you see how big they are next to the trees? Now, as any good giant, Finn McCool had his work to do, so he was often away from home. Lovely Una didn't seem to mind, for there was plenty to keep her own hands busy, spinning, knitting, and even giving a pretty touch to their great house. Life was very pleasant indeed. One morning, when Finn McCool was busy working with his kin, building a causeway to Scotland, the word came that Cuchulainn was coming. Uh-oh, who is Cuchulainn? Cuchulainn was a giant too, and without a doubt the strongest in that part of the world. When he walked, the very earth trembled, and with one blow of his fist he had flattened a thunderbolt, so it looked like a pancake. He was so proud of that feat that he kept the thunderbolt in his pocket to show off just how strong he was. Do you see the flattened thunderbolt in his hand? Every giant in Ireland had been given a good beating by Cuchulainn. Every giant, that is, except Finn McCool. And Cuchulainn swore by the green that he would never rest, day or night, winter or summer, until Finn McCool was added to his list. Whoa, he sounds like a bad giant. So far, Finn had been smart enough. He kept moving about whenever he heard that Cuchulainn was in the neighborhood. But this time Cuchulainn was sure to get him. So Finn left the causeway and sped off for Knockmany Hill, his house, and his darling Una. "Finn, my love," said Una, greeting him at the door, "what brings you home so early from your work?" "The chance to get a sight of you, my sweet thing," said Finn. Since he was as honest as the summer day is long, he added, "and to keep out of the way of Cuchulainn. He's after me." Una soothed her husband. She brought him his slippers and lit a pipe for him. She stirred up the peat fire so it would be cozy. Then she set down a huge mug of stout and cut a gigantic slab of soda bread for her dearie. Do you see how he's got a cat sitting on his slippers and how little the cat looks? The little sheep under his chair. When and the peat fire, that's peat is something they cut from bogs and dry it out and they burn it in Ireland. So that's what a peat fire is. And the mug of stout is a mug of beer. "Then, my husband of mine, enough is enough," said Una as gently as she could. "For years you've been hiking around from one place to another to avoid this Cuchulainn. Why, you even built our house high on this windiest of hills so you'd be able to spy him comin'. You'll not get a moment's rest until you stand fast and face him." So she's saying he has to come face to face with Cuchulainn. "Aye, I'll be getting plenty of rest if I stand fast and he knocks me down. I don't have the heart to face a man who can make a young earthquake just with his walk, and who carries around a flattened thunderbolt in his pocket just to prove his strength." So Finn is a little bit afraid of Cuchulainn. At that, Knockmany Hill gave a little dance. Do you see how the picture has come sideways and the stool has knocked over? "He's coming," said Finn, his face turning a fine shade of pale green. So Knockmany Hill gave a little dance because Cuchulainn is coming up it. Whenever he walks, it's like an earthquake. "Now hush," said Una, "and give me time to think. Do you worry that I won't do all I can to help you settle this matter once and for all?" Look at the fairies flying around Una and the leprechauns on the floor. Una then worked a charm the fairies had taught her. She took 9 woolen threads, each a different color, and braided them into 3 braids. She put 1 around her right arm, 1 circling her heart, and the 3rd around her right ankle. Now nothing she did could fail. So do you see the braided threads around her arm? Around her right arm, and then up on her chest around her heart, and the next one is around her ankle on the right side. The fairies taught her that. Next, she sent around to all the neighbors to borrow 21 iron frying pans. She hid them in 21 loaves of bread that she baked on the fire in the usual way. She set them in the cupboard with some bread she had baked the day before. Then she took a pot of milk and made it into a fresh, wet cheese and put it along with some white stones at the foot of the cradle she had made up. What is she doing? "Now, my darling," she said, handing Finn some baby clothes, "put these on and do everything just as I'm about to tell you. And remember," she said at the last, "Cuchulainn's strength lies in the brass finger he has on his right hand. Now quick, into the cradle, because I hear that man mountain at the door." Boy, she worked fast, didn't she? You see the leprechauns standing on the top of the cradle and over by the stones that she's put on the floor. And doesn't Finn look funny in the pink baby dress with the pink booties, and he's going to put a bonnet on. "All right, woman," bellowed the giant at the door. "Where's that coward, Finn McCool, that I've been chasing after all this time?" "Well, well," said Una with her sweetest smile. "Now isn't that a shame? Finn was off working on the causeway when some important family affair called him away. but he'll be home by tea time, so why don't you just come right in and sit down?" Poor Finn trembled in the cradle. Look at how he's crammed into that cradle. Do you see the leprechauns and the cat and the two sheep underneath it? "See this?" Cuchulainn said, pulling what looked like a pancake out of his pocket. "This was a thunderbolt until I caught it and flattened it, and that's what I'm going to do to Finn McCool, too." "Tisk, tisk," said Una. "That may not be as easy as you think. Finn McCool's a big broth of a man. Why, take a look at our little baby, and you might be getting an idea of the strength and breadth of Finn himself." So she's making her husband seem like the baby. Cuchulainn peeked in the cradle. "Chirrup," said the huge baby, looking back at him. "My," said Cuchulainn, "what a big boy!" "While you're waiting, why not have a bite to eat?" said Una. She put some loaves of bread on the table, along with a can or two of butter and a pile of cabbages. So see, she's got the bread and the cabbages and the butter on the table for Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn, who was as much a glutton as he was a bully, popped the loaf into his mouth and took a huge bite, right down on one of the frying pans. Clang! Do you remember she baked the bread around frying pans? Do you see how he's taken a bite and hit the frying pan? "Yow!" shouted Cuchulainn. "What kind of a devil's bread is this? Here are two of my teeth out." "That's Finn's bread, the only kind he eats," said Una. "Is it a bit too tough for you?" "Too tough for me?" shouted Cuchulainn. "I should say not. Just give me another." Cuchulainn chomped into another loaf and into another frying pan. "I'll not have a tooth left in my mouth, woman. There's two more out," Cuchulainn hollered even louder. Look, he's lost 4 teeth in the front. The baby began to holler too. "Hungry, hungry, hungry!" "Ah, sweet dumpling," said Una, and she handed baby Finn a loaf. And because there was no frying pan in it, Finn ate it right down. "More," said the baby, and he gobbled up another loaf. "He seems a strong lad," said Cuchulainn, getting a little worried. If this was the baby, the father must indeed be a bit stronger than Cuchulainn thought. "Ah, yes," said Una, beaming. "Why, instead of dollies, he loves to play with those white stones there in his cradle. Show the nice man, baby dear." So he's starting to worry because he's thinking the baby Finn is actually Finn's baby, so Finn must be much, much bigger. It's a pretty good plan Una had, isn't it? Do you think your daddy would get into a cradle and look like a baby? Finn did as he was told. He picked up a stone that was really the cheese and squeezed all the water out of it and popped it into his mouth and ate it down. Cuchulainn was not to be outdone by a baby. He grabbed a stone and squeezed. He squeezed and squeezed. Squeeze as he might, he couldn't get a drop of water out of it. He popped it into his mouth, and with a chomp, there went the rest of his teeth. So see, Una made a piece of cheese look like a white stone. So Finn is actually just squeezing a piece of cheese and then eating it. But Cuchulainn, thinking that the other the rocks in his cradle were just the same as what Finn just squeezed the water out of and ate, decided he was going to try to eat a stone too. The howl that came out of him almost broke all the windows. When he finally calmed down, Cuchulainn said to Una, "What kind of teeth does that lad have? They must be made of iron. Let me see your chompers, baby." At that, baby Finn opened his wide mouth, and Cuchulainn stuck in his brass finger, the very brass finger that was the secret of his strength. With a strong bite, Finn McCool bit the brass finger right off. Then up Finn leapt and began to pound the daylights out of poor, weak Cuchulainn. That was that. See, because he got his brass finger, he didn't have any strength anymore. You see the cat on Cuchulainn's thumb? And look at all the leprechauns kind of dancing. They're excited that Cuchulainn is not dangerous anymore. Out the door went Cuchulainn, never to bother anyone, let alone Finn McCool again. "Tea's ready, my love," said Una, and Finn McCool sat down with the best giant wife in the whole world, and they lived a long, happy life. Boy, she is a good wife, isn't she? You think your mom could work up a plan like that for your dad sometime? On the very last page, it says, about this book, stories about the popular Irish giant Finn McCool have been handed down from generation to generation. Perhaps Finn McCool is best known for the Giant's Causeway, the highway he built between Ireland and Scotland. The encounter between the giant Cuchulainn and Finn at Knockmany Hill is one of the funniest of Finn McCool's adventures. Details in the border art were inspired by early Irish jewelry and metalwork. Tommy de Paula has chosen to use William Butler Yeats' spelling of Finn McCool. The Giant's Causeway is in County Antrim in Northern Ireland, and it's on the very northern part of the island, and there are these big round blocks of basalt that were brought up by an earthquake. And in the early days, people didn't know what had caused that, so they made up this story about giants building a causeway to meet in the middle between Ireland and Scotland. And those were like the stone pavement for the causeway. These are pictures of what that causeway looks like. Pappy and Nani have been to that causeway, and it's amazing. Well, I hope you like this story. Tomorrow we're going to be reading Mud Puddle by Robert Munsch, illustrated by Dusan Petrasic, and I think you'll really like it. Have a good evening. I love you all, and I'll be back with you tomorrow for story time. Bye-bye.